Hi, everyone. I'm your co-host, Roger.
And I'm also your co-host, Oren.
And we're here to welcome you to our inaugural first production of our new show, which is called Off the Rez Radio. And to kick things off, we're going to provide an introduction to the show, to the hosts, Oren and myself, and give you a general idea of what we hope to accomplish and how each of us came to be involved in this project. So I'll go ahead and start off, Oren, if that's okay.
Yeah, please do.
So I'll start off with an explanation of what Off the Reservation or Off the Rez Radio is designed to be. We're designing it. We're still in the planning stages, but we're designing it to be a multi-platform, multimedia project with the goal of highlighting and researching important anomalous information that's generally discarded, ignored, or covered up within the mainstream narratives that we hear in the news media, in our textbooks, in our schools, our colleges, and our universities. And we're particularly interested in issues that relate to human civilization and evidence for a deeper antiquity than what we're generally led to believe. Although we don't limit our research to just anomalous history, and we probably couldn't even if we wanted to anyway, because once you get into this type of research, as we'll see as the show goes along and we get into deeper discussions, this type of research tends to lead down many diverse and very diverging paths to subject matter that's somewhat related. As for myself, I'll start off again by explaining how I came to be involved in this project and this particular kind of research. I've been a writer pretty much my whole life, and I was through writing that I got involved in this. I was looking for a story. I was looking for a new experience, something to write about, something to motivate me. And I wound up, to make a long story short, I wound up at a UFO festival in Exeter, New Hampshire back in 2012 over Labor Day weekend. And long story short, there was some fun stuff, some wacky stuff that you would expect at a UFO festival. But at the end of the day, there were 3 lectures. There was a very serious component to this UFO festival, aside from the costume contests and dressing up your dog as Martians and stuff like that. There was a very serious component to this UFO festival, and that was lectures by people who claim to be experts in the field of UFOs and paranormal investigations. Most of them were writers. Many of them, writing was their sort of avocation versus what they did full time. And when I walked away from that UFO festival at the end of that day, there were 3 lectures primarily that stuck with me that day, that made me really start to pursue this line of research in terms of my own writing and my own reading. And the first lecture that impacted me was actually about remote viewing and astral projection, which is the idea that someone can learn how to project their consciousness outside their body, travel into different spaces, different times. And at the time, I wasn't really sure how all that related to UFOs. I thought we were there to talk about aliens and flying saucers. But my interest was really piqued when the speaker, and I don't recall his name, started showing declassified documents up on the overhead projector or PowerPoint presentation. I just dated myself. Up on the PowerPoint presentation that showed declassified documents that showed that the United States government had spent decades and who knows how many millions of taxpayer dollars developing a psychic spy unit within various branches of the military and attempting to use astral projection and remote viewing, basically teaching soldiers and airmen to project their consciousness off somewhere else into Moscow or wherever and to gain actionable intelligence. That was the first lecture. And the second lecture that struck me was by a guy who had a PhD in physics. He taught at a local college. And given that he was a PhD physicist, I was anticipating a very scientifically orthodox lecture about exoplanets and the habitability of other planets or the moon or building bases on the moon or something of that nature, the possibility of...
He was smart.
Yeah, I was a smart guy. I was expecting like smart talk. And this guy started talking, and I was blown away because this stuff was high strangeness is the only thing I can really explain it. Was his lecture was dedicated to his belief through practice that, and other smart people with PhDs at the college where he taught, belief in the practice that they could contact extraterrestrial intelligences through psychic projection and meditation, basically having a seance and contacting aliens. That was what his lecture was about. And this guy had a PhD in physics. So insofar as the first lecture had gotten a hold of my attention from a political perspective, because as I've gotten older and wiser and read more books, I've become very distrustful of authority and government. The second lecture, as a lifelong Christian, a former minister, a person who studied biblical languages at the undergraduate level, the second lecture got my interest as a Christian because, of course, as a Christian, I know that it's entirely possible to contact entities using meditation and seance type activities, but they're not extraterrestrial, at least in my estimation. So those were the first two lectures that really kind of got me turned on, like, hey, maybe there's really something to this. And finally, I'll wrap it up by going right onto the
this one I like the best, I think.
Yeah, right onto the third lecture. And the third lecture was by, I'm sorry?
Was it Richard Dolan? I thought you remember saying was one of the names.
Yeah, Richard Dolan. That was he actually, we broke for lunch, and like I got there at like maybe 10 o'clock in the morning. So from 10 to 12:30, it was these other guys. And then Richard Dolan was so famous, he's appeared on Ancient Aliens and other TV shows of that genre, I guess, some documentaries and stuff. He's a very well-known guy in this particular circle of research. And it was promised that he was going to be one of the most credible researchers that we've ever heard in the area of UFOs. And he did not disappoint in that area.
No.
His story is that he was studying for a master's degree in Cold War history from, I believe, Rochester University in New York, a legitimate regionally accredited school. And he had gained access to some declassified Soviet archives as part of his research on his dissertation. And some of the documents that he came in contact with proved beyond a reasonable doubt that the Soviet government was heavily involved and interested in researching UFOs, attempting to discover where they were from, what they were for, and whether or not they could be exploited for national security purposes. And of course, he had tons of documentation to back it up. And his story was that eventually he earned his master's degree, never entered mainstream academia. He was so intrigued by this whole UFO thing and everything that he discovered, not only in the Soviet Union, but in the United States, that he ended up writing a 3-volume history, which is kind of like the standard history of UFOs, called UFOs in the National Security State, Book 1, Book 2, Book 3, and it's divided up by time period. I bought the 1 volume that was available that day at the UFO Festival. And Richard Dolan, and on top of the other guys, but mainly Richard Dolan, just because he was so credible. I mean, this guy came to UFO research from, he's just studying how we pointed nuclear bombs at each other with the Soviet Union.
Right.
And so I walked away scratching my head and saying to myself that maybe there was something that needed to be investigated. And when I came back and I kind of wrote down for myself in my journal, which I still have somewhere, my impressions of that day, basically I came up with 3 things. Number one, UFOs and a few other related paranormal phenomena were very real things, very real phenomena. And that the most convincing evidence for this fact that it was real is that governments spend time and money researching them, and particularly from a national security and intelligence perspective, because it's not just the militaries that are involved, it's the Central Intelligence Agency and other, not just in the United States either, Great Britain, USSR, other Western governments.
Training you were talking about too. I mean, I know they have proven that they've gotten intelligence. They had intelligence that they have gotten no other way. And it was given by this organization, this group of army men trained to astral project, and one in particular.
Yeah, I don't have any evidence on hand right now to back that up, but I can recall reading in various places that there was actually actionable intelligence that resulted from the activities of these psychic spying units. And there are you know, high-ranking officers who have written memoirs detailing their experience. I haven't encountered any of those books because my research has kind of gone in a different direction. But yeah, absolutely. The UFO factor, which, you know, the encounters with UFOs, all these encounters with what we would call paranormal or supernatural occurrences happening in and around military and intelligence installations for, you know, particularly the United States and Great Britain, but also other countries. That made me think that, you know, this stuff is real. And at the end of the day, I also, that they were all somehow related, because I wasn't sure how they were related, but they were all related, not just to our political history or our national security history, but also to religious history. You know, there's a lot of very powerful religious institutions in the world. And I didn't know how at the time, maybe I still don't now, but I kind of come up with a good idea. My current writing project is involved in that, but come up with a pretty good idea how the national security aspect and the religious spiritual aspect are related. But at the time, I realized that they probably needed more investigation. And finally, the biggest, and maybe the biggest as an American, as somebody who's like a political junkie, these phenomena, these paranormal or supernatural or anomalous events, not just UFOs, but, you know, further down in my research now, you know, hidden history, covered up history, the antiquity of human civilization, in addition to UFOs and the paranormal, they're related very intricately to our concepts of liberty and freedom here in the United States and in Western society generally. If that's for no other reason than the fact that it's very clear, based on the evidence, irrefutable evidence, not just by Richard Dolan, but other authors, books that I can recommend. It's very clear that the United States government and other governments have been heavily involved in paranormal, anomalous research, while at the same time, through organizations like the National Academy of Sciences, the National Education Association, and federal funding of universities and research, that they would have the general public believe that it's all bunk. And that just something doesn't add up to that, because at the end of the day, that's a lie. That's a lie that the government's perpetrating on the public, because they're researching and funding the research into these paranormal activities and these anomalous events and anomalous history, while at the same time promoting to the public that it's not real, that if you believe this, you're somehow a kook. And obviously, once I got started on all this research, it's led me down a ton of different paths, a ton of different authors and writers that I've encountered. And some of that includes, you know, something that we both hold in common, which kind of was the impetus for this show, this project, which is the evidence for the extreme antiquity of humanity and other anomalous historical facts. And that kind of in a nutshell is how I wound up here. It's all started at a UFO festival. So
I think it started before that, as you just said.
Well, yeah, it started. Yeah. I mean, it started in
that got you here on this program, though. And
my mistrust.
And Roger's story for getting on this program is the same as mine, because his story is what made him ask me to do this with him. So I thank him for that story, and I think he deserved he deserved to get that intro on our new show. So this is all Roger's idea, and this is Roger's baby right now, as far as I'm concerned, and I'm just helping him to nurture it, hopefully. So with that, how I came into this line of thinking wasn't like Roger. Roger had a very classical education, like he said. I didn't have such a classical one, not a bad one, nonetheless. But I come from this from a fiction standpoint, from growing up with horror movies and horror stories from my mother, from Alfred Hitchcock, Twilight Zone. I remember seeing her read V.C. Andrews. The covers on them, I don't remember the books in the 80s. They used to have the little cutouts on them, and you open it and it'd be a different picture on the inside. I used to love those when I was little. So she would read me those stories, and we'd rent the movies together, Rosemary's Baby, The Exorcist, the whole works. And through all of that supposed entertainment, I found there is something hidden in our fiction that calls to us. Yeah, I think the best author that always grabbed it most for me was H.P. Lovecraft. He talks about those ancient fears of those gods that we could feel in our bones, you know, when he talks about, I never knew how to pronounce it, Cthulhu and his ilk, these ancient chaos gods. And the same goes for Greek mythologies. And you read all these fictions, and they all harken back to that idea that that idea of a lost part of our world that was more magical maybe than we could ever realize today, you know. So that's what first got me interested in this. And then I had a great history teacher in high school who made me question the reason why we bombed Japan in World War II. And she didn't say it was a bad reason. She just gave more reasons than you're usually taught in school. You're only taught that it was just to end the war there and save all the Marines. But few people realize there are also half a million Russians ready to march down there and take that territory over. And America didn't want Russian influence in Asia. So there's something to think about, and that always made me question history. So with all that love for this lost and secret art that my fiction gave to me came to fruition through real history and the questioning of real history. And I kind of put them together, and I've always loved wondering what really happened, what was said in the president's rooms when decisions were really made. If you watch shows, I don't know if you've seen House of Cards. That's a great behind the scenes. I'd love to be a fly on the wall, and that show grasped it, but probably better than any I've ever seen. So, and just knowing that there's hidden ideas and agendas, good or bad, and different. Nonetheless, you never get the full line, especially for the news, especially nowadays with so many news organizations kind of in ownership of the people who kind of have a conflict of interest in maybe certain news stories getting out there. So all that together, and then throw in the 9/11, a little 9/11 shake, and everything we were willing to do, myself included, when that happened for our country, and what our country made of it are two very different things. And there was a very deep strength in America after that, and was used improperly, unfortunately. It was used more for gain than just ending whatever problem we thought we had to end. So that alone, without any conspiracy, is upsetting enough, and you question it enough. So you want to start adding conspiracies, I'm willing to accept many, at least at face value, for maybe meaning something. I'll never say I know, but my main reason for being here is to want to uncover, especially my lost history, where we come from, because I think it's hidden from us purposely. I think our Bible is one of the better sources for grasping at some of it, but there's a deeper part, and maybe we're not supposed to know, but I'd like to. Things that are hidden from our view, histories that are kind of just washed over in parts of the Bible that were maybe left over, because we know books of Enoch, Book of Jubilees, all these other books that aren't accepted in the Bible, but they have these stories, and they were actually, I think, is it Cambodian Bibles, Roger, that they were found in the 1700s.
Which ones? The Book of Enoch. As far as I know, the oldest extant version of that exists in the Ethiopian Bible.
Ethiopian, yes, it is. You're right. I don't know why I said Cambodia. I always get the E's, I guess. That's right. It was Ethiopia, but it's an Ethiopian Bible that was written before 400, I believe. Right, that was translated throughout the years as it was, and that book still existed, and all the other books of the Bible along with it, in their totality. So that's meaningful. That was taken out, and I believe it was 400 A.D. I believe before that, you tell me, Roger. Someone told me that before that it was accepted as part, or could have been accepted as part of the biblical narrative.
You're talking specifically about Enoch?
Yes.
Yeah, Enoch. Enoch was found with the Dead Sea Scrolls. So
right.
You're looking at, with the Dead Sea Scrolls, you're looking at
accepted biblical
pretty
narrative.
Much. I would forgive me if I'm giving you incorrect dates, but approximately 150 BC. Maybe it may have been before that, 150 BC up until the time of Christ. The Roman occupation of the Levantine area and stuff like that, with Enoch. But and I think what you're thinking of is around I believe it was 200 AD is what gave us the Masoretic text, which is the quote unquote official Jewish version. and if you'll forgive me on screen here, I'm going to grab a reference just so I can answer your question. But the official Jewish, the edited Jewish version, I have books everywhere, dude. There's answers at my fingertips. The edited Jewish version came around 200, and that was largely a reaction to the growth of Christianity. But what I'm pulling up right here, if you will bear with me 1 second, is, okay, I was wrong. I pulled up a copy of the, as you know, I'm a Greek guy, studied Greek. When I was studying religion, I got a copy of the Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Old Testament. I was just looking to see if Enoch was in there. It's not, but
no.
Yeah, Enoch depends on who you ask. But the thing, I will mention this, not to get too far off track, but it's funny that you bring up Enoch, so it's something I researched. So Enoch and Jasher, the reason, one of the biggest reasons why you should take them seriously, for those of you listening, watching, or you, Oren, one of the biggest reasons why you should take them seriously is Enoch is actually cited, and Jasher is also cited within the biblical text.
Yes.
Jasher is cited, I believe, in the book of Joshua.
You told me that.
And someplace else, perhaps in the Old Testament. I'd have to look that up. But for sure, it's one of the epistles in the New Testament, not a Pauline epistle. I believe it was either John or one of the Johns or one of the Peters, one of the epistles in the New Testament. So the Orthodox accepted canon itself cites these books. And if the Bible itself is citing these books, I'm not claiming that they have the same religious or spiritual authority as the Bible, but I would claim that if the Bible takes them seriously, then we should take them seriously too.
Why not?
So,
they talk of the Book of the Kings also in the Bible. I'm sure if you had that book, you'd probably want to read it too, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I'm constantly discovering religious texts that I haven't encountered before. So there's always, like, even if it's demonstrably proven that they were written in, say, 150 AD, they're still presenting ideas that maybe we should take seriously. So
think about it anyway, yeah, right?
Yeah, if nothing else, it gives us a, and that doesn't just apply to religious literature, it applies to literature of all kinds. It at the very least gives us an idea of what people at that time were thinking about, and people who were closer to the beginning of whatever beginning we're trying to get to. So, yeah. I mean, to move the discussion along, I mean, how do you want to go here? You want to give a preview of things to come, or you just kind of want to bounce ideas off each other? And I actually, let me mention one thing, if I may, Oren. Since this is introductions, I'll mention how Oren and I came to discover each other as partners in this research. Oren and I share the same profession. At one point in time, up until about a month ago, we shared the same workplace. And I believe it was probably about 4 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, maybe. Yeah, it was about
4 years ago.
It was about 4 years ago.
Might have been 4 years ago.
Oren was on the late night shift. I was on the second shift, and I used to work one late night shift a week. And we happened to be in the same working area.
Is this? Yeah.
I don't want to give too much away about what we do or where we work, but so we ended up working in the same place, and we had a little bit of downtime. We were waiting for supervisors to come around and sign paperwork and whatnot, and we kind of hang out together for a little while. And I was noticing that you were always reading and writing, and I believe at the time you might have been studying literature at like Southern New Hampshire University or something like that, but online. And anyway, I noticed that you're always reading and writing, and so being a writer and a voracious reader, as you can tell by the stack of books behind me, I asked what you were into, and we kind of give each other looks, and it's kind of like, you wouldn't believe it. You wouldn't believe me if I told you, and I'm just kind of like, try me, man, try me. And so that's how we kind of discovered each other. And then we started giving book recommendations, and we didn't always work after that. I think it was about maybe a year, maybe not even a year, maybe 8 months. We had that Saturday night thing, but yeah, that's how it was through work.
Yeah, and it was. I knew Roger had was talking one night, and he used the word jurisprudence, and it was one of my favorite words at that point because I just learned it myself a couple of years back. So, he said a sentence exactly how I'd say it, and how much he cared about liberty and the following of American jurisprudence, and obeying the Constitution. It's there for a reason, and it's hard to change for a reason. And that was another shared experience we had too. That I remember understanding that he had an understanding for liberty that I did, and part of that liberty is wanting to know what maybe powers that be know, that we should know these hidden secret things. Why not? If they should benefit society, they will not. Knowledge can't hurt. For the most part, I believe, of course, you can take it to the wrong ends. There is use of knowledge that can hurt, but knowledge itself can't hurt. So not allowing us to experience some of that is a big case for this as well, because there's people out there that are actually not just us, but way better than us, that are out there at these sites that are really piquing our interest these days with the facts on the ground. Carbon dating that is accepted by modern science, and modern day archaeology is still rejecting these ideas. Roger just sent me some writing that is believed to be writing by some and not by others, by decoration by others. 700 decorative symbols that repeat themselves in different areas, I guess. But that's hidden. That's fought against, like almost like a church fought against Copernicus and almost how Socrates was given poison. These truths are fought against, and we look to the past and we see holding down those truths was wrong, and it doesn't change it nowadays, and yet we still do it and accept it. So that's a big part of the show too, I think, Raj, for me.
No, yeah, you pulled out a good point there. You said you said that some of the excuses that are given for, I don't know if you didn't say excuses. That's what came to my mind.
But yeah,
you said basically that this knowledge shouldn't be hidden. That information in and of itself is not bad. Well, you didn't use the word information.
Right.
You used the word knowledge.
We teach our children not to, don't we? In our school system, even I was taught that.
Ostensibly, I would say ostensibly we teach our children that
truth was bad, and the killing of these people who told truth were bad, but they've always been killed or ridiculed or destroyed. And we look back, and we as a country have said, no, we deplore that, we hate that, and yet here we are, at least killing the truth. How far are people dying because of that? Who knows? How far you want to rabbit hole there, but nonetheless, the truth is being hidden. And I don't think it's just the government. I know you say the government, Raj, and I want to, for myself, I don't think it's the government. I think there's people within the government. The government itself is just whatever the people are that make it up, and I still think there's good public and civil servants out there that are really trying for their country. So. I don't want us to forget that, but the government itself is, it's not just one thing, it's, and I want it to be known that I think there's a chance for our government to fix itself, not the way we're doing things nowadays, unfortunately, but it's out there. It's happened before. We've done it before. I think as a country, I hope you'd admit that, right, Raj? We've had issues and fixed them before as a government, right? As a country.
No, yeah, I think that our civilization, I would say Western civilization, not just in the United States. The United States is a particular brilliant, ingenious incarnation of Western civilization.
Yes.
But Western civilization in general, yeah, we pay lip service. I'll say we pay lip service. There's two cross currents, and I'll agree with your statement that it's not the government. It's not, Barack Obama's not sitting in the White House like, going, yes, we hid the history from the American people.
Right.
I think that what I would say is there are interests within every, this is generally the way I put it, there are interests within every monolithic institution in our society, whether that's religion, whether that's academia, the media.
It's impossible not to be. Humans are corrupt. Their organizations can be,
But there are people that through their own self-interest, the lie that's perpetrated is not so much the lie of, like, to go back to my UFO convention.
Yeah, please.
The lie that's perpetrated is not UFOs don't exist. That's not the lie that's really perpetrated. The lie that's really perpetrated is we're not going to tell you that they exist because there's going to be mass panic. If people really understood what UFOs were, or if people really understood that, you know, the myths of Atlantis are based on high technology that existed long before the Egyptians or the Etruscans or somebody like that, society will fall apart. It's for your own good that we're withholding this information from you. That's the biggest lie that I think is perpetrated. It's not so much the concealment, it's the reasoning behind the concealment that really bothers me.
And like I said, that's the reasoning. That's what we've taught, at least that I've grown up and taught as an American. And I think what our politicians are at least fakely trying to espouse is that we as a country have always tried to pull the blanket back from that kind of thing. But we're going right off and letting our these parts of government, or whatever it is, these parts of power, even, I'll just say, hide this from us, you know, and then accept that as an okay reason, because they're giving the reason because they know they have things hidden. I mean, even if it's that part of the Grand Canyon that they block off, artifacts that have been lost, the more than 150 New York Times articles that write of excavations finding giant skulls and such, giant bone fragments, what have you, and those things just disappearing, all those different finds disappearing over the years, you know. In the Smithsonian, I've read a lot of what they do to suppress some of this history, and to really bully people around who have theories that would dispossess them of their hierarchy, I guess. So I mean, some, and like I said, and I want to say, I don't think all the motivations are the same. I don't think everybody's hiding history to keep humanity down. I don't think everybody's hiding history to be greedy. There's different reasons. There's different motivations why people do it. Some people just want to make their living, right? And they don't want everything they've been teaching is about to come crumbling down, and they've been at the forefront of arguing against it. It's kind of hard to stay strong in your career after that, maybe, no? So a little bit of fear of just livelihood being affected by it. So I think that's true. And I think there's a lot of different motivations. And you know, I want the audience to know that I always think about that. I'm not just some I'm not a big generalist. You know, I like, there's very specifics for me on the ebbs and flows of society, and it's not all some big grand monolithic conspiracy, but in the end it kind of is, because there is somebody there that's actively willing it. And of course there's things that aren't going to go exactly, nobody can predict, you know. We're not Isaac Asimov and the Foundation here predicting the mathematic certainty of where society's going to be. So anyways, yeah, so I mean, there's nuance to it to me, and we'll use words that don't allow for the nuance, but I want to know, I want it known that from here on out, I am nuanced, and I'll be willing to take calls or talks or chats or dialogues with anybody that want to break something I say down. So be prepared. Just in the interest of timeliness, we're not always going to be able to break down the minuscule of each subject too while we do this program. So that's the note. Another note I wanted to be said before this first broadcast went by.
No, yeah, I agree. It's I think we're on the same page in terms of, I think the real goal, aside from the fact that this is an outlet for our own somewhat unique
perspective.
Yeah. Aside from that, I think sharing this information publicly is one of the main goals of doing that, is that we want people, individuals who may come across this, you know, whether it's one viewer or 100,000 viewers. We're not doing this to get rich. We're not doing this to make money. We're doing this because we want people to get on board with following the truth, wherever that truth leads you. And if my ideas are criticized, that just either one brings me closer to the truth, or it makes my ideas more robust. I mean, that's really the scientific method. And so yeah, I think we're totally on the same page about that. Can I just touch on one, actually two things?
Yeah, go for it, man.
Things that you brought up earlier, since we're kind of like bouncing off each other here, and we've departed from the introductory remarks thing. Well, maybe it's not, because people are getting an idea of how we think, which is good. But you mentioned how you came to this from fiction.
Yes.
And obviously I came to it from, you know, I have my academic background is the law and religion. Those were the two things that I studied as an undergraduate and briefly as a graduate before I decided that being a lawyer wasn't what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. And there's a big misconception about fiction, because I'm a big science fiction fan, as you know, and I'll say this: fiction is an easier way to tell the truth than even what we're doing right here.
Oh, absolutely.
It's easier to tell a story.
Interesting.
Huh?
It's interesting.
Yeah, you know what I mean?
Self-deprecating humor there, Raj. That's all.
No, that's fine. But I mean, fiction is an easier way to tell the truth. And I like that you bring up H.P. Lovecraft, because H.P. Lovecraft deals with some of the most fantastical subject matter one could possibly imagine. And one of his contemporaries was actually...
It's really mind-bending. If you like horror fiction, I recommend you read some H.P. Lovecraft, because you'll be blown away. It'll stretch you out. The Dreamland of Kadath. I love that story. I'll try that one on for size. But go on, Raj.
No, it's cool. You can interrupt anytime. But an interesting contrast, to get a little academic here, is a contemporary of H.P. Lovecraft was Charles Fort. And I don't know if you know who Charles Fort is. If you don't, I have every book that he wrote, of course. But Charles Fort, he was a writer. He wrote some short stories. He wasn't really successful. He's kind of like a Charles Dickinson kind of character. He was just barely making a living. And then he came up with this inheritance from an uncle, and he was able to pursue his own interests and write whatever he wanted to write about. And so he started clipping like some sort of like psychotic person, I guess. Like, he started clipping all these news clippings from, like you mentioned, the news reports from like places like the New York Times and stuff that disappear. And, you know, a story that should be on page 1 or 2 appears on page 17. We started clipping these stories about, you know, frogs falling from the sky and, you know, Mothmen traipsing about the American countryside. And he wrote, I think it was 4 books. I'd have to go back and look, but he was very dry. It was just kind of like, and I bring your attention to the daily news from Charleston, West Virginia, where frogs fell from the sky, and this, that, and the other thing.
Yeah.
But they were contemporaries, Charles Fort and H.P. Lovecraft. And I think on some level, those two different writing styles, they were trying to, on some level, bring the same type of awareness to their readers.
About H.P., I think, didn't he hang out with that other guy there, the wickedest man in London?
Oh, Aleister Crowley?
Yeah, or didn't they write letters to each other?
I wouldn't doubt it. Aleister Crowley was kind of like, he was a very popular guy in his day, so he wasn't just the wickedest man. What did you say, the wickedest man in England?
London or England or?
No, he was the wickedest man in the world. That's what he said. He wanted to be the Antichrist. That was his life's ambition. So. Yeah.
I don't think he made it. Nonetheless,
no.
On these albums, kind of funny.
But and just continuing that, I think that what you were saying about not just the fiction, but when you brought up the Hiroshima example, like the willingness to question history.
Yeah, right. And she taught me that well in school.
Yeah, you sit in a classroom, and especially as Americans. I just read a quote. If nobody's familiar with Project Censored out there, look up their stuff, projectcensored.org, I believe it is. But their goal is to bring censored news stories to the attention of the public. They publish a book every year dealing with the most censored news stories from the prior year. That's a tangent. But anyway, there's a quote in, I think it was Censored 2014, which I just read maybe 2 weeks ago. But they said that especially in America, we're not concerned with history. We're more concerned with myth. And I think that's to some extent true. You know, like you and I, Oren, we work with a lot of, well, you're a veteran. I'll point that out. Oren is a veteran. He served our country honorably in combat. And, you know, we work with a lot of veterans, and there's this not just with veterans. I'm not picking on veterans, of course, but I think there's this tendency in patriotic Americans that if you question like our motives or our tactics, that somehow you're unpatriotic. So the willingness to question
is the utmost of patriotism.
Yeah, I mean, like I hate to quote Hillary Clinton, but dissent can be patriotic, and I think that to connect the two dots, I think that your love of the horror genre fiction, which brought you to this point, like maybe some of these monsters are real kind of thing, is kind of part of, you know, to connect those two dots. That's kind of part of your willingness to question official narratives. So, and that's really what we're doing here. Is we're here to question official narratives.
Yeah, I'm glad you went a little more in depth because I wanted to, but you know, it's the first time I got a little nervous. But yeah, I remember questioning history after that all the time, wondering what else at least, because you could easily say that was part of the truth. You know, the official narrative. It doesn't have to be a lie. It can be part of the truth. But just I think, especially nowadays, you know, our news media for the most part, there's still trailblazers out there. Don't get me wrong, but they're bought and paid for, you know, and few and far between are the ones that are really, really asking the tough questions of our government, of academia, of science nowadays. And it's kind of just go along with it. No one's actually looking at the information, and there's a lot there for what we're saying to at least be looked at. And the fact that it doesn't want to be looked at or isn't being looked at properly, I think says a lot for maybe what we're saying. The fact that you wouldn't even want to look at this valid information of these people that have been in these fields and been executed. I want to recommend a book, Our Occulted History. It tells how these people are demonized and chased out of their professions because of their disagreement with the accepted narratives of history, archaeology, and the like. I think especially in the area of dating things. That's one thing. Also, it reminds me of Ancient Aliens too. That's a great show, Roger. And the only unfortunate part of it is they always say everything's got to be green men that did it. I guess in the end of all things, I don't know why many narratives can't be true, including that at least thought of. We could have just been a high civilization. It has to have no outside supernatural introduction. It could have just been a high civilization. You could still have your narrative of evolution in that and everything. So to say, but the problem with that show is it makes light of its great discoveries because it has really great and factual discoveries. What's the name of that site in Turkey, Roger? I know you know it always off the top of your head, and I always get it mixed up with other ones.
Göbekli Tepe.
Yes, Göbekli Tepe. That's a beautiful example. I'm reading Graham Hancock's newest book, and his introduction starts there. And it's a pretty amazing site. And as you dig down further, they find the older they're getting to parts on the site, the building of it was actually better than the newer parts. So it's older by how many years, Raj? At least 5,000, we're saying. Then
it depends. It depends on who you are quoting. I actually just held up. I don't know. Can you see my video feed right now?
Yeah, I can see you.
Yeah, I just held up this book when you said Göbekli Tepe. That's just how
cool.
That's that's how much of a nerd I am. I just have all this stuff at my fingertips. But it depends on who you ask in terms of dating. But I believe I read an article about a year ago. It was an older, and the article itself is probably 3 years old, maybe 4. But it was from National Geographic, and I want to say it was either 7,000. Some people were saying 7,000 BC, 6,000 BC.
Right.
It was either that or 7,000 before, 7,000, 6,000 years before our earliest site or whatever, like when we thought like organized religion had kind of begun. So I can't remember which, and obviously there could be potentially a huge distinction there, but it definitely reset the timetable. And that's not, look, Göbekli Tepe is out there. It's in National Geographic. It's in all kinds of scientific journals. There,
accepting it as a aspect of a civilization, which I think is insane.
Which I don't know. Honestly though, like, to be fair, I don't know if that's an indictment of researchers or if that's an indictment of the public who would just say like, yeah, so there's a temple that was buried under the sand with a bunch of like religious, animal carvings.
I think those that are in these fields they say their whole idea is the truth, right? I mean, that's science. It's the finding of the truth. I mean, during the 17 1800s, they rejected a lot of the Christian mythology and other mythology because they said they want the truth. And that's why they took a lot of that narrative and idea out of any kind of science or scientific idea. Any of these narratives of the flood myth, of civilization being higher than where we accept it scientifically. They rejected all that at that time, and they've been rejecting it since, and even at their own peril. They reject it even against their own scientific method. They do not match the theory to the data, but they match the data to the theory.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point in terms of you create what you're talking about, like the Enlightenment,
official narrative.
But you're saying
the Age of Enlightenment. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yes, exactly. It was the Age of Enlightenment, wasn't it? When the scientific these scientific principles became so strong in us to make sure we use the scientific method and to be a logical race of human beings.
Yeah, what they said was my criticism of that, and I can make a book recommendation, which I think I made this to you, and I've made it to a few other people. But again, whoever's out there listening or watching, Voltaire's Bastards by John Ralston Saul, who was
I got it on my list.
Yeah, that book, and it's a difficult read, but that's one of his big theses in that book is a criticism of Enlightenment thinking. And basically what Enlightenment thinking is, what the Enlightenment did, what the quote unquote scientific revolution did, was they said it's not science unless we can observe it, measure it, quantify it, put it in the laboratory, and repeat it. And so what we've been taught, and it's really hard in Western society to kind of separate that from our mainstream, our everyday thinking.
Because it's
it's ingrained in us from the time we're in elementary school up until the time God forbid you have a PhD in a hard science, because you're going to walk away from that thinking, like, if I can't look at it, if I can't measure it, which is kind of the same thing in like physics, measurement and observation are kind of the same thing.
Right.
But what that did was it limited our body of available knowledge from here down to here.
Right.
And which I just did that on video. And if you're listening via podcast, you can't see my hands, but it limited our knowledge. And, that's kind of, again, I think that's a narrative that we're here to criticize in this program, is that, it's not just what I can do in a lab or repeat in a lab. It's not just materialist thinking.
No.
And then what we did was we created that framework. Evolution's a great example. Darwinian evolution is a great example.
There's got to be some intelligent intuition. Why not? What's wrong with some intelligence? I mean, we're given a little bit of intuition for a reason. We add some logic and intelligence to it, some knowledge. What's wrong with taking a couple steps one way or the other, at least for a thought, at least for a what if.
Yeah. Well, not just that, but you discount a huge source of human information, of human knowledge. You're discounting a great source of that when you discount.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, historically, exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like,
okay, I didn't know if you were saying the perceptually or some way.
No.
But as spiritual beings here and now. So, but yeah, historically for sure, I think, and even that could be proven scientifically. I think at this point that you're ignoring that good body of knowledge. If you just use general, the mathematic principle of odds is called, Mr. Vocabulary.
I'm sorry, I was trying to read a note that I made. Let's say that again.
The mathematical principle of odds.
Okay, statistics and probability.
Thank you. Just statistics and probability. Thank you. And just look at the narrative of world-ending deluges geographically placed throughout the world. I think that makes a strong case in itself. I know they use these laws of probability to find out if there's fraud at the IRS. They have certain numbers that come up that pretty much almost guarantee there's fraud there. It's weird the way that happens, but when people are fraudulent, certain numbers come up that don't otherwise. So when you lie mathematically, it can be shown. So if they can use that and those algorithms and count on them, they can't look at an algorithm that would say, take into consideration these geographically disparate communities that share the same story of their world-ending deluge, and it can't be accepted as perhaps a scientific fact that we haven't come to full realization of. You know, just because you don't have a full realization of the scientific fact doesn't make it not a fact. You know, you might not have every detail of that deluge, but to deny that it exists, I think, is silly scientifically, even scientifically.
No, I think you're right, because the note I was reading, I was working on a writing project last night, and this paragraph is criticizing the current scientific belief that if you can't observe it, it's not real. There is no reality without observation.
This note is trying to disprove that.
Yeah, well, not trying to disprove it; it's criticizing it. So, okay, I'll give you the whole backstory. This chapter is based. This is a book that I'm working on. This chapter is based on the work of a mathematician and physicist at MIT named Max Tegmark. Max Tegmark wrote a book called Our Mathematical Universe. The thesis of that book is that everything in our universe is a mathematical structure, and that the mathematical equations that underlie our current understanding of physics implies that there are other dimensions, other universes, and that reality is greater than what we can see, feel, touch, hear, smell, and test in a laboratory. And then he makes kind of like a little side note, and he says, you know, there's a lot of scientists out there that would criticize what I'm saying by saying that there is no reality without observation. And what I said in my writing, the work that I was doing, I said, I think it's more honest and accurate to see this assertion for what it is, a cheap intellectual parlor trick designed to protect the influence and position of those who make it. For any scientist, or more accurately, the scientific establishment, to define reality as only that which subjects itself to the current technology and capability of science, does nothing more than attempt to establish science as a modern-day high priesthood under a different name that usurps a unique amount of influence in society. It also flies in the face of the history of science and human ingenuity.
Sure does.
Because, you know, the human imagination, you know, a great example is that you know, Nikola Tesla and his willingness to think outside the box. Well, not just Tesla, Einstein, Maxwell,
the Wright brothers.
name a scientist or an engineer.
Ford.
You know, who did something great, who pushed the envelope forward.
They didn't do it through observational things.
No, they did it by imagining.
They did it through a vision in their mind that isn't observable, and they made it observable.
And that's exactly. And that's what people don't realize about Albert Einstein, is that Albert Einstein, for the most part in his career, did not operate in a laboratory. Albert Einstein operated in a recliner with a pad and a pencil, and he just thought about this stuff. And then what he thought about, he was a genius enough to describe it with mathematics. Mathematics
that our audience understands. Mathematic constructions aren't constructions made up of different numbers and signs. They're just explained through mathematics. They're structures in the universe. Just to dumbify for myself, I had to think twice about it, because when Roger first said it, I just imagined tons of little numbers and things floating around in my body.
No, but that's
so just for the layman in us, they're structures just like anything else, just like a 2x4 that can be explained through mathematics. And they're not made of math symbols. Math symbols describe that universe.
Correct. That's a very accurate way of stating it. And since you bring up 2x4s, to illustrate what we're talking about in the grand schemes, things are not always what they seem, and we should really dig for the truth. That 2x4 that we perceive as solid, if you smack it,
has a nominal measurement too. It's actually 2x4. It's 1 3/4 by 3 and something else.
That's a great point. That's a great point about like what we perceive to be truth, but that 2x4 that we perceive to be solid. If you smack me upside the head with a 2x4, I'm probably it's gonna hurt. I might go unconscious, and there's a possibility that I could die. It's a solid object. But only 1/4 of that. Man, think about that number. Can you even imagine that number? I can't.
No, I don't think so.
1/4 of that 2x4 is solid matter. 99.99999999999 ad infinitive percent of that 2x4 is empty space.
Yeah, it is too. Isn't that crazy?
Between the nucleus and the electrons and the atoms that make up that 2x4. Same thing goes for us. Same thing goes for the book, the pen I'm holding in my hand, the tablet that I'm writing on, so on and so forth. So when it comes to questioning reality, there's really nothing wrong with questioning reality, but the narrative that we're fed is that we're experts, here's the reality. And Noam Chomsky actually said, going all over the place, but Noam Chomsky actually wrote that in his book, he actually said, it was an interview that was recorded in the book On Language, which is credited to Noam Chomsky, but beside the point. Noam Chomsky said that system is actually a very subtle form of censorship in a society that ostensibly dedicates itself to free speech and free expression and free ideas.
Truth and supposed truth, right?
Right. Because if you can convince people that they're crazy because they believe against the mainstream, and therefore they're unwilling to share the truth that they found, then you have done the long way in censoring the truth.
Yeah, I think your buddy. Oh, it does. I think I'll bring up an example of that is your buddy David Icke, who you give hopefully you give him a little more credit than I do by saying that he's using his scapegoat of shape-shifting lizard men to be able to disseminate the truth. I think he's using it to discredit it wholeheartedly, but nonetheless, I mean, he's so spot on with so many of his predictions and analyzing governments and the minutia of money and its influence, as well as like just everything that happens. He's really spot on, and at the end of it, he always say it's shape-shifting lizard people that are doing it all. Now, whether you want to believe that or not, I think that takes away from the truth. And so I try to stay away from too much. I want to talk during the show about some of that deeper stuff, no doubt. But for me, the more important is the why, the direction. What is actually caused by it? What are we losing because of it? What can we gain by fixing it? The more concrete answers that are probably occulted within some of the other aspects we'll be touching on. But for me, that's really important throughout the show is the why, not as much as the shape-shifting lizard men doing it, which, who knows? Maybe there are shape-shifting lizard men doing it. I'm not going to say which way or the other on that, because you could never know that. So instead of wondering what we can never know, I think Roger and I are going to try to concentrate on what we can know, what people have shown, what proofs have been given, especially archaeologically, and scientifically even. And if you even put some of the suppositions given by modern day science up to its own scientific method, there's a lot of failure there in modern science, just accepted with new discoveries in DNA models and our ideas in mathematics and where we are as a human race. I mean, I recommend listening to Trey Smith's show Evolution, and just the mathematic impossibility of us having this show right now and being just a mistake of the universe and evolution is impossible. It's nigh impossible. It's like winning the lottery every day for your life and then some. But yeah, that's all I have to say about that's another aspect of the show that's important to me. So I wanted to get that out there. Well, I will be willing to consider like silly things, as silly as we want to say they are. Some of them I don't think maybe are so silly, but I'll act like they are for now, just so I can keep my credibility on the factual stuff that we can actually show people. What it means, I think, could be left up to each person a little bit. But I think don't find truth within only yourself. Find it from outside yourself. And that means researching, listening to even the opposing point of views. So we look forward to those coming in. I do, as I second Roger's nomination on having those opposing views come in and strengthen, or at least change for the better our assumptions.
Yeah, if you have to be willing to accept things from outside your own sphere of influence.
Yeah,
it comes down to kind of like a. I guess it could be explained as a sort of like a modern day hacker mentality, that the idea that there is no such thing as bad information. There's only information, and what you do with that information makes it bad or good. It's the actions that you take because of that information. So, and I will mention, David Icke's not my friend. David, if you happen across this podcast or this video,
I apologize.
I would love to be your friend, David. Your buddy. If you ever want to come on the show, David, I will welcome you with open arms.
Like that, Raj.
No, that's okay. And I don't necessarily agree that idea that he uses lizard people as a cover for exposing like the truth. That's not original to me. That's somebody else's.
But no, I know. I bring it up because you and I had a discussion, so I think we can call it ours. And it was only because you, like I say, we should questioned it. So that's part of what this show is. So
no, listen, I honestly, I don't believe that shape-shifting lizard people run the world secretly. I don't believe that. I don't either, Roger. I just think that David Icke presents a lot of good information. Although I will point out that Genesis chapter 1 and 2 points out that the reason why we live in the world that we live in now ultimately comes back to a reptile.
Right. But we can also chalk that up. We say there's a lot of. I think we both agree that there's some allegory in those older books of the Bible. Something, because we both agreed that the Bible wasn't a science or a textbook, and it never proposed to be such.
No, and that's a great. I think I don't know how long we've been doing this now, but it's probably time to wrap up because I know you got to work in the morning.
Yeah, we can finish off here with what you got to say.
And my son has band practice at 7:30. I don't know why the school district schedules it for such times, but since you mentioned reptiles and lizards and the allegorical nature of that, I think that's a great way to introduce what we plan on doing for our next episode, which is going to kind of set up the future discussions after this in terms of anomalous history and so on and so forth. And that's the proper understanding of myth and mythology and human knowledge. Is that where we plan on going on?
That is where we're going, buddy. You are going to give your in-depth ideas of how mythology can be better looked at. Roger has a extensive knowledge. He reads Greek and Hebrew. I think Greek more so. But he's looked at a lot of ancient texts, and as you see behind him right there, he's got a wealth of knowledge with him. And I supplement them with my little stories here and there, hopefully, and I'll get better at those. But yeah, we're going to talk about how mythology can be used to better understand ourselves. At the very least, it reflects the thinking of the people that were writing it. What influenced that thinking, how much of it was truth, we'd like to go into in the show. And Roger's going to give a nice overview of how we're going to do that.
Fair enough. All right. Yeah, I'll just add on, it's not just about mythology, as you're absolutely correct that mythology gives us an idea of how people thought in the past, or not even in the past.
I say at least. And yeah. I think you're going to show and go ahead and what else?
Yeah, I think, exactly. And I think just to give you a preview, just to introduce it, mythology is a way of passing knowledge, whether that's knowledge spiritually, physically, scientifically. That's something we'll discuss in the next episode. But yeah, that's a great jumping off point. Again, I know you have to work in the morning. I have to be up in 6 hours or so. So yeah, I just want to thank I want to thank you, Oren, for taking on this project. I think it was about 4 weeks ago. Like I said, I'm a writer, and I was kind of beating myself up. I've been stressed out. I had a change in work environments, and against my will, I got transferred to a new work location, and I was beating myself up because my routine got off, and I was like, I got to write more, I got to research more, I got to read more, and how can I do this? And it's like, if somebody else is going to hold me accountable, that's going to keep me doing what I got to do. And so I thought, who would be willing who would be willing to go in on such a venture with me? And you're the only person that came to mind. And so I'm
surprised I'm doing it. I'm pretty nervous still, but I'm liking it. So
hey man, you're live right now, so don't forget that. But you know, I sent Oren a text message just out of the blue, like, hey man, would you consider doing a podcast? And here we are 3-4 weeks later, whatever it is. I think it was 4 weeks ago, because
we
met 2 weeks
got families and lives. We're gonna kick it off the ground, but yeah, we'll be here at least every other week here with Off the Rez Radio, and we hope you enjoyed it tonight, and hope you come back for future episodes if you haven't yet. I'm Oren,
and I'm Roger,
and have a good day.
Thanks for joining us, and we hope you join us in the future. Good night.
Night, Raj. Thanks.
All right, buddy.